everybody, it's Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about what I have read so far in the month of November, which mostly was books that I enjoyed well enough, so solid 3 stars, but there were also some books that I did not really enjoy, so you have some ranting to look forward to. But before we get into that, let's talk about the books that I'm still currently reading and hoping to finish before November is over. The first of those is Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory, which is one of the most definitive collections of Arthurian legends that were collected sometimes some centuries past, and this of course was on my goals for 2020 to have read this, and I'm finally a good chunk into it. I'm about 320 pages into it, so almost at the halfway point, and so far I'm I wouldn't say I'm enjoying it, but I'm not reading this because I want to enjoy it writing wise, but mostly because I want to have read it. So yeah, I'm good enough, I guess, and I hope I'm gonna finish this by the end of the month. It's very fitting that I'm also currently reading an Arthurian retelling, and that is The Camelot Betrayal by Kirsten White, which is the second book in the Camelot Rising series and the sequel to The Guinevere Deception. I'm about 100 pages into this, so about a bit more than a fourth of the way through it, and so far I'm really enjoying it. I've also already started the buddy read for my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where we read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman per month. So I will leave the links to that book club down below and up there if you're interested in joining. And that buddy read for this month is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. I cannot really say that much about it yet because I'm only 50 pages in, but so far I have noticed that 2 of the 3 perspectives we were introduced to are first person, which I'm not too much of a fan of, but I will hold off judgment because, again, as I said, I'm only 50 pages into this. And then the last book I have started and I'm currently reading is How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black, which is the short story collection that came out that's kind of in connection to the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. And I've read 4 short stories, I think, so far, and I'm also enjoying it. Also, there's really pretty illustrations in this book. Then before we get into talking about the books in order of the rating that I gave them, starting as always with lowest and ending with highest, there are 2 books that I want to talk about first. The first is No Longer at Ease, which is the second book in the African trilogy by Chinua Achebe, which I have already finished. This is a trilogy of generational stories of men in Nigeria or living in Nigeria from kind of during the time of colonization, during the time of the first missionaries to, of course, then after colonization. And I also really enjoyed the second story. I think I enjoyed the first story a bit more though, which was Things Fall Apart. And maybe I will get to Arrow of God, which is the third story in this month, so in November. If not, I will read it in December. And then I also have one book that I just didn't rate because it's a fairy tale story collection that I just don't rate. I don't rate those types of books, and that is Japanese Tales, and this was my pull from my TBR jar, or the book that I chose from my TBR jar for November. This is a collection of Japanese tales, as the title suggests, from the 12th to about the 14th, 15th century. And yeah, I would say I enjoyed the stories themselves, but I did not enjoy the writing and the way they were told. But I don't know if that has to do with just the way Japanese stories are told or with the translation of the stories. And I was surprised, although I shouldn't have been knowing what I know about Japan, but I was kind of surprised how crude a lot of the stories were. Imagine your worst and most negative prejudices about how weird hentai is, and then imagine that, put that into stories from the 12th to the 14th century. And then you basically got what half of the stories in this collection were like, and the other half was Buddhist stories. But yeah, I don't know if I would recommend this particular collection of Japanese tales. However, I think a lot of people would find Japanese tales in general interesting if you can find some better collections than this one. Now we're coming to my first rant, and that is The Lady of the Lake by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the 5th/7th book in the Witcher series. and it's the last book in the overarching storyline of the Witcher series, and I think I can one last time summarize what this series is about. This series, the Witcher series, follows Geralt of Rivia, who is the titular Witcher. What that means is that he has been alchemically mutated to be better able to hunt monsters and kill monsters, and that is what he does for a living. And his destiny is connected to the destiny of Ciri, who is the child of the Elder Blood, and it's kind of like talked about what exactly that is during the series. But yeah, this was the last book, and it was such a non-ending. I have never read such a disappointing ending to a series. It was so bad. It was so bad. And it was one of my main things that I complained about in every wrap-up when I talked about one of these books, that usually in series, like every single book in a series still has its own storyline kind of, and its own climax and its own kind of wrap-up. However, this series just kind of continuously drags on, and there's climaxes in the middle of books, but then no climax at the end of the book, and it's really weird. And even in the last book before that, it didn't really feel like it was building towards anything. And that was because there was no building towards anything, because the ending just went poof. And it was kind of part of the theme of the series, but because it's kind of like, you know, there's no happy endings, there's no fairy tales, you can't just put a nicely wrapped bow on the ending of a story because life isn't like stories. And I understand that. However, this is not life. This is a story. I want a story to end. And so that really, really annoyed me that there was no ending. And then the second thing that really annoyed me was because it's once again a case of a male author just abusing its female characters, which is just beautiful. I just love how men in fantasy always think that under the excuse of grimdark they can do anything they want to their female characters, and it just doesn't have to, like, it's okay because it's grimdark, you know? And I'm kind of annoyed about that, because I do think there's ways to put like sexual abuse into books with it not being like off-putting. I am not particularly sensitive about that, but I still want there to be a reason. And there kind of was a reason, but the reason was stupid, so I don't accept the reason. But yeah, so I did not enjoy that. And I would not recommend you go and read the Witcher series. However, I will have a series review up once I have read like the last spin-off standalone book. Another book that I really didn't like this month, however, I didn't actively hate it, but I just found it was a big disappointment, is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, which is his first release since the Aragon Inheritance cycle, and yeah, was also a big fat disappointment. In this series we follow Kira, who is a xenobiologist, and like, because she is a xenobiologist, one day she kind of just fuses with this alien matter thingy, and from there on out she's just like in the middle of this big new mystery thing. It's sci-fi. It's, you know, first contact with alien sci-fi in space opera thingy. Anyway, this book, there's two positive things I can talk about. First of all, the cover is absolutely beautiful. I still love this book. I still think it's one of the most beautiful books I got this year. The second thing is that it's easy to read. Now, the reason why it's easy to read is because there's nothing there. And I'm extra disappointed that I did not enjoy this book and that there was nothing there, because this was my first buddy read with Monica from Mooney Reads, who, by the way, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? You need to go and subscribe right away. I will leave a link down below and up there, because she's amazing. And yeah, I really wanted to read a book that I really enjoyed for my first buddy read with her. But I really didn't enjoy this because, first of all, no story whatsoever. It's like the same 5 scenes were repeated over and over and over again. Second, the main character was about as bland as white bread. And you know, there's good white bread. Like, the French make amazing white bread and the Italians make sometimes amazing white bread. And the other half of the time they make the blandest white bread ever, because they don't even put salt in it, and that's the white bread I'm talking about. That absolutely disgusting, saltless white bread. And that was what the main character is about. Like, that's That's her entire personality. Then also, the relationships were boring as fuck. I wasn't invested in any of them. Maybe that also had to do with the fact that all of the characters were as bland as white bread, because like usually I can get attached to at least one character in a story. Even if it's that one character that has 2 lines and that doesn't even seem to have personality, but I somehow like project a lot of personality into them. Yeah, even that character didn't exist in this story. So it's just stupid. Then I also wasn't interested in the world building, which at first I thought was because it's science fiction and it might be too sciencey. But to be honest, the sciencey stuff was just them throwing around some words that seemed sciencey without really explaining what anything was about. And I love in my world building if I can get like, if I can dig my claws into it and take it apart. And I don't even care in science fiction if like the science part is actually sciencey and like if it's accurate to what we know now of science. I just wanted to seem like that, to seem plausible and to be explained. But that wasn't the case here. There was absolutely no world building whatsoever. Just like kind of got a surface varnish or whatever to make it seem like there was world building. And that's just the main problem with this book. There was a lot of things that wanted you to make you think there was something there, but really, once you scratch a little bit, there's nothing there. Nothing at all. And then the one thing that I gotta give Christopher Paolini kudos for is that he gave a female character of his, as a male author, gave her the period. So A for effort on there, however, F for execution, because the period was nothing like a period actually is like. Like, it was so obvious that he didn't talk to any female friend about what periods are like. And I do know that everyone who gets a period experiences them very differently. However, to all my friends who have periods that I have talked about, none of them would describe their periods like that. So yeah, it's definitely not how periods usually are. So yeah, big fat disappointment and kind of sad about that, but I will keep the book because it's pretty. So sorry if the frame changed, I got a cold, but anyway, the next book I want to talk about is Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, which is the first book in the Scholomance series. And in this world, if you have magic, basically your chances of survival are 1 in 20. However, those chances get better if you graduate from the Scholomance. However, once you go to the Scholomance, your chances of graduating are also only 1 in 4. So yeah, not that good chances for survival in this world. And so we just follow one character who goes to the Scholomance, and there's not really that much I can say about the plot of this book, because while I enjoyed reading it, there just wasn't that much plot, to be honest. It was mostly just our main character Elle living daily life in the Scholomance and kind of getting together with this dude who seems to constantly save her life. And yeah, so that was that. I gave it a solid 3 stars. I enjoyed it well enough while reading, but the main character, especially in the first half of the book, just really got on my nerves because she constantly complains that she doesn't have any friends, but then she also was just constantly only rude to people. But then she was like, okay, I don't care if they're actually my friends or not. I need some alliances. I need to get together with those people because if I'm on my own, I won't survive. However, in the next scene, she threw that out her window already because, like, fuck survival, I guess. And yeah, I just really did not like that about her. However, she did get better in the second half of the book. I did kind of enjoy the romance, I guess. It was kind of awkward and funny and kind of cute, so that's that. And I think I would pick up book 2, but yeah, this first book, it's just a weird experience because again, I enjoyed reading it, but as soon as I think about it more closely, there's not really that much there in the book. So yeah, just a weird experience overall. Then I also read Sybil's Secret by Juliet Merrily. I gave this like 3.5 stars. This is the sequel slash spin-off to Wildwood Dancing, and it's only the 2 books. It's a duology. And in this one we follow one of the sisters from the first book, like a different sister from the main character from the first book, and she follows her father to Istanbul for some trading because they're on the search for this secret religious artifact, and there's some secrets surrounding that artifact and the Fae might have something to do with it again, and our sister Paula might have to go on a little mission again. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first book, but it was also because I kind of enjoyed the romance more in the first book. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but like, it was a solid read. Again, I had a lot of solid reads this month, but not a lot that were like outstanding. The next book I enjoyed a bit more and I gave it 4 stars, and that is Black Sunday by Tola Rotimi Abraham. And I can finally tell you what this is about. This is set in Lagos, starts in the 90s and kind of goes to today or to like the late 2010s. And in this story we follow 4 siblings. And we follow their life, kind of. There's not really a plot because of course it's literary fiction. A lot of times it's more about the characters than the plot. But we follow these 4 siblings from their childhood to their adulthood, and especially after their mother loses her job and then the father loses the money in some gambling, and then both parents leave. And we kind of learn about the children and we kind of learn about how they dealt with this. I actually marked quite a few quotes in this book because I found them really like hard-hitting. And what I also found interesting is to read this at the same time as I read the African trilogy, because even though there's, I think, 50-60 years in between the 2 books being published, there's still a lot of the same conversations being talked about in both books. By the way, both books are written by Nigerian authors. There's still a lot of conversations around like religion, Christianity versus traditional religions. There's still a lot of conversation around like feminism and toxic masculinity. There's still a lot of conversations about corruption. And I just found that really, really interesting, how like so much time can pass but the same conversations can still be had. And so I definitely would recommend reading this book and also reading it at the same time as the African trilogy. And then the last book I want to talk about, the book that I enjoyed so far the most this month, is The Canterville Ghost, The Happy Prince and Other Stories by Oscar Wilde. This is part of Penguin's Oscar Wilde collection, I think. They have like a few different books like with these style of covers, all Oscar Wilde books, and this is just a collection of some of his short stories. I also read one of his short story collections like last month in October, so I did not read all the short stories in this book this month because a lot of them I had just read. And yeah, again, I just love Oscar Wilde. I love his satire. I love how his satire either veers towards like hilariously funny and sarcastic or like really depressing. And then every now and again in between you have this like really Jesus-centered and religion-centered story, which is just kind of funny to me because it's just not what I put in connection with Oscar Wilde for some reason. And I usually don't like these stories that much, not because like the topic or anything is something that annoys me, but because I find they don't really fit in with his other stories. So yeah, that's just kind of interesting, and I would be interested like in terms of when those stories were published, if they were published at different times than the other stories. But yeah, that was the last book I wanted to talk about. And with that said, I hope I'll see you soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out. Again, all the links to my book club are also down below, so go and check those out as well. And leave me a comment if you have read any of the books that I talked about just now and what your thoughts were on them. And with that said, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!